Okay, we'll call the Senate Minerals Committee to get to order. We've got rules and we'll follow them and we'll make sure you do too. Respect everyone and address the chair. We're going to hear 3 bills today, we hope. And so we'll start with a continuation of Senate File 134. And I think the maker is here. Where were we on this? Were we on public testimony or were you still talking?
He was talking.
I think we asked about public testimony.
Testimony, but I think I can help sharpen a point to some of that public testimony
Okay,
and maybe direct it to the 2 issues that seem to be at question within the bill. And so number 1 was there was a question is, does this come out of the counties, out of the industrial siding? So we do that 7.3% out of the sales tax that goes. Senator Rothfuss has brought that up, and this is, no, it does not. And so that's one point of clarification. So where does the money come from? So for those unmitigated impacts to wildlife, and I want to make one point really clear. It's only wildlife under the jurisdiction of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. It's not federal trust species. We have no authority over endangered species, migratory birds. So it will narrow that scope up because that's what we have jurisdiction over from the state of Wyoming. What it would do under those unmitigated impacts, it would pass those costs. There would be a request by the agency to include those as part of the industrial siting mitigation for those unmitigatable impacts. And then as the bill reads, it can be negotiated with the Industrial Siting Council can reject it. It goes out, they take public comment on it. But if there was a determination that there was an unmitigatable impact, it would be the project proponent's responsibility for paying for that. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that sharpens the focus on the public comment and get to because those seem to be the 2 issues I think that arose during the early part of the public comment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would, if there's any more questions, if not.
any more questions for the bringer of the bill? No, hearing no more, thank you. Thank you, Senator Hicks. Any agencies like to speak on this bill? And 2 pop up. Come right on up.
Chairman Anderson, I'm Jenny Staben, the
I don't think you're on. Is it green?
It's
Is it?
green.
Oh, pull it a little closer to you then.
Chairman Anderson, senators, I am pausing because I am asking to approach the bench to provide amendments that I'm about to suggest as far as the procedure on this bill.
And did we get your name?
I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siting for the Department of Environmental Quality.
Oh,
She has handouts.
I have handouts. I apologize, sir. I
Okay,
just goofed up
okay,
this
Jenny.
procedure.
give them to the clerk if you would, please. Stay Ben. Go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson. Before you look at that document that I've just passed out with procedural suggestions on this bill, I thought it'd be helpful to do an overview of how the comment period applies to an industrial siting application. I have heard throughout this session concerns that the Industrial Siting Council has never refused a permit, or that it may look like a rubber stamp proceeding. To be able to say that that's what it looks like is actually a testament to the procedures that are followed in the industrial siting process. What folks, I think, don't typically know is applicants on these large projects and applicants for an industrial siting permit typically engage with the agencies anywhere from 2 to 5 years before an application is actually submitted to the Industrial Siting Division. My division openly, when we do meet with new applicants, one of our first comments is to say, have you engaged with Game and Fish? It's our understanding Game and Fish typically requires about 2 years of surveys on properties, and you need to engage with them and start working with them on mitigation or whatever Game and Fish would require. Once my division, the Industrial Siting Division, receives an application, within 10 days, we have to notify 19 agencies who then have a 60-day comment period. Now, typically, those comments we receive are so far down the timeline in which these applicants and projects have interacted with agencies. So before that, when we receive an application, in that application, and specifically with Game and Fish, there's typically a description of discussions and promises and mitigation that the applicant has already agreed to with Game and Fish. Also, we receive comment letters and recommendations from Game and Fish for issues that, it's my understanding, are still unresolved within the application. And within those comments, any agency, including Game and Fish or any of those 19 agencies, then can make requests for specific permit conditions. Now, while the 19 agencies that comment on an industrial siting application will say we only make recommendations. That's true, they make recommendations. But under the Industrial Siting Act, the division, Industrial Siting Division, is charged with taking those recommendations forward, which then we redraft into permit conditions. And because we are a party to the permit, we make recommendations and include those permit conditions, which is based on the comments and requests made by the 19 state agencies. So essentially, the Industrial Siting Division represents those other 19 agencies at these permit hearings. Now, I think it's very clear, just to remind folks, that an industrial siting permit is decided through the process of a contested case hearing. It's not a commission meeting, it's not a council meeting. So therefore, all the rules of civil procedure, the Administrative Procedures Act, and the contested case rules under Title 16 apply. So it's a different set of rules than what you would usually have for a public meeting. Because of that, public comment is closed. That is, under the contested case rules, public comment is not allowed because this is a legal hearing amongst parties. Now, the Industrial Siting Act allows for limited appearance statements, that is, written statements, to be made by the public. So although the public, under contested case rules, is not able to provide testimony, direct testimony, speaking testimony, or evidence at a hearing in the sense that other parties do, they are able to provide a written statement. They can attach anything they want to that written statement that then the council at the hearing reviews and considers as part of their decision-making process. So as I would now like to go through these suggestions of procedural changes, I do want to make it clear that we understand what this bill is trying to accomplish, and that any of the changes I'm suggesting are just to alleviate procedural issues, and they're not meant to have any effect on the intent of the bill. And so I'd like to go through my suggested changes with the understanding that on this bill, it would be the applicant paying for unmitigated impacts to wildlife, and it would be those species under Game and Fish's jurisdiction. So to begin walking through the bill, I would start with page 1, where, of course, I have no suggestions. Page 2 describes what a request for a wildlife impact payment would look like. I have no suggestions there. Page 3, that appears to outline what kind of information would go into one of these requests. And then if you look down on page 3 from lines 11 to 15, that describes that the trust or the Game and Fish Department can enter into a contract with the applicant regarding a mitigation payment for wildlife. Now, it's my understanding that in the applicant's interaction with Game and Fish, through that application process, I say, to be more clear, before an application comes to industrial siting, at this point in time, applicants do come to agreements with Game and Fish on several mitigation issues. And they can also, and it's my understanding they do, come to even a monetary amount to apply to mitigation. So here, though, on page 3, it talks about the applicant and Game and Fish or the trust coming to an agreement outside of the Industrial Siting Council process. Now, if you turn to page 4, now on page 4, I am suggesting to eliminate all of page 4. And the reason for that is because it describes how if an agreement is made between the trust account or Game and Fish and an applicant, that then that agreement is to just be adopted, approved, monitored, and enforced by the council. What that does is it's asking, or I'm sorry, it would be requiring a decision-making body to approve, adopt, a document, an illegal agreement, and then enforce it. And our enforcement, our notices of violations, just so you're aware, are $10,000 a day to an agreement that the council itself does not have a right to review or change, as this bill is currently written, and would not be able to even review it for if it is within the council's jurisdiction. More importantly, it's just not appropriate for one agency to be determining or enforcing a private agreement made by another agency. And at this point in time, both the applicant and Game and Fish are free to enter into such agreements and should be able to do so, but maybe not without the oversight of another agency. More specifically, if you look on page 4, line 4, it discusses providing public comment at the hearing once the, if an agreement then, when it is accepted by the council, that at the hearing there's public comment. Again, as a reminder, this is a contested case hearing. And under the contested case rules, public comment is not allowed. We get around that through the Industrial Siting Act by allowing limited appearance statements. But this but for this bill to allow public notice and public comment at the hearing contradicts contested case rules. If you look at line 6, it states that no other evidence may be provided to the council because an agreement has already been met. This requirement, if you place it within a contested case, also contradicts the contested case rules, which allow for all parties to respond and present evidence on all and any issues at the hearing. And also the contested case rule that states any party may cross any witness at a hearing. And under the Industrial Siting Act, that any documentary evidence any party wishes to be considered, utilized, or relied upon may become a part of the record. So procedurally, this just contradicts contested case rules as well as the Industrial Siting Act. And if you go down from line 6 to 20, it just basically describes, again, how evidence to be received only from the applicant, Game and Fish, or the trust fund, who are parties to the agreement. When there is no agreement made, this subsection B from 16 to 20 basically describes how the request at a contested case hearing could only have testimony and evidence provided by Game and Fish or the trust or the applicants and no other parties. Again, this is in contradiction to contested case rules. If you'll turn to page 5, I have marked for page 5, lines 1 through 23, to be stricken because they're just redundant. That's all. Lines 1 through 3 is requiring that the council, if they do hear upon the issue of unmitigated impacts to wildlife, that they review the evidence by preponderance of the standard. They have to do that anyways in accordance with the rules that apply to the hearing itself. That's the same for essentially the rest of page 5, where the council in its decision, lines 5 through 7, talk about the total dollar amount. The council is required to do that in its findings anyways. Lines 9 through 12, findings of fact. The council is required to do that by other rules. Having to provide reasons for its decision, determining a schedule or how a payment would be required. Essentially, page 5, those are all requirements that the council has to do in every decision or order in accordance with the rules of civil procedure and contested case in the APA, a mixture of that and our own regulations. So this would just be redundant. It's just not necessary. On page 6, just lines 1 and 2, a continuation of removing language that's not necessary because we already have several procedures in place is my only suggestion there. Now on page 7, lines 1 through 4, my suggestion there is that on line 1, that it would be the Department of Revenue instead of the state treasurer on lines 1 and 2, just so this would be in alignment with our use and taxation statutes. And something for you to also consider for lines 1 to 4, placing them within the sales and use tax statute, because within that statute is where the Department of Revenue is expected or required to distribute funds. Oh, I apologize. I'm going down the wrong path. The applicant's paying. I absolutely apologize. Please ignore any comment on page 7. We'll back out of that. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Now, next, the next procedural issue to be brought up is on page 11, lines 20 through 23. On those lines, it states that at the request of an eligible entity that the division would be directed to provide technical assistance to the eligible entity in the preparation of anticipated impacts to wildlife related to the project. Now, this technical assistance, the division, we would interpret that as being a packaging of the information, basically how it would be presented or provided in a document. As far as technical assistance to the value of unmitigated impacts to wildlife, it would be appropriate for that technical assistance. We would only be able to provide exactly how you would present it because the Industrial Siting Division, we do not have the expertise in wildlife to understand their valuation or something like that. Now, with impact assistance, the division does go to local communities or if the local governments request assistance. And what we do is we provide them with references to the sales and use taxes that describe what an unmitigated impact is, and we ensure that they know that definition. We also provide examples of what's been presented to the council before. So the technical assistance that the division provides under the Industrial Siting Act is here is the bounds of what you may ask for, and also here's an example of how it's been done in the past. If it came to technical assistance to determining unmitigated impacts to wildlife, that's not something that the division is necessarily equipped for other than how to present that information, but we don't have the expertise in wildlife. Now on line 23, I've crossed out in providing recommendations and for negotiation of agreements. On Under the Industrial Siding Act, 3512-110, those are recommendations, and that section applies to the recommendations and comments made by the 19 state agencies that comment on a permit. Those agencies, we rely on their expertise to make their comments and make their recommendations. So I would recommend crossing out the section on line 1 referencing 3512-110, because the division, it would not be our place to determine a wildlife recommendation, because we don't have the expertise. Later on that line 1, where it says for the negotiation of agreements with applicants, simply that seems to indicate that the Industrial Siding Division would assist in negotiations, and we really don't have legal authority. Plus, we would leave it to our sister agency to conduct negotiations and have the freedom of choice in how they choose to conduct those negotiations. Now, with all of that said, what does remain unclear is whether this bill is just to apply to unmitigated impacts that are identified. Is that meant to replace the process that we do have in hand? The process currently being when an applicant agrees to conduct studies or mitigation or any of those efforts made before an application comes to the Industrial Siding Division. Also, within the application, the applicant will describe promises that they have made and agreements they have made that to address game and fish mitigation. Then you have the comment period where Game and Fish is free to comment and request a permit condition. 9 times out of 10, the permit condition requested by Game and Fish, we do copy and paste into a permit condition. So my question is, it may be helpful to have clarity of if that entire procedure is still to continue, plus payment for unmitigated impacts, or if unmitigated impacts is supposed to replace any of those procedures. That's just something to be considered. Now, after saying all of that, I would like to make a procedural suggestion that may be helpful to consider. Here you have on page 12, lines 4 through 11, or I'm sorry, 4 through 14, that add the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust account as one of what would then be now 20 state agencies that can comment on a permit application. If you take this on page 12, lines 4 through 15, if you keep that, and also on page 8, if you keep lines 1 through 9, what you would accomplish on page 12 is giving the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust Board the right to comment, make requests, and also request permit conditions on a permit. If you keep lines 1 through 9 on page 8, that would give them the authority to ask for unmitigated impacts. Now, by just including the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust to be able to make comments, they would be able to make comments, make recommendations, request permit conditions. The division then could carry those forward to the council, and the council then would be able to debate them, make a decision on it based on the information provided in that comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick question for Dr. Staben, if I may. All right, Dr. Staben, this last scenario, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you and there were more things that needed to be included, but that was going to be something I was looking for. It sounds like those 2 paragraphs or these 2 pieces of legislation would put them into the standard process, and then they would be potentially eligible to justify an unmitigated impact through the traditional process, which means it would come out of the 2.76% or whatever percentage is available through the sales and use tax. Is that correct?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, As this is currently written, that payment would still be paid by the applicant. But what it would do is it would have the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource and Trust Account Board included to make comments, request permit conditions. By including the changes on page 8, that would give them the authority to request funds for unmitigated impacts. So what it would do is it would put them in the process and allow their requests to be reviewed by the council without contradicting any rules of civil procedure or contested case.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Dr.
Senator
Staben, any idea how we would change it so that it would just go through the traditional process? I see what you're saying about the paragraph M, where that clearly indicates that it would be impact payments from an applicant. And then we're referring to the statute that I think is being created through this. Do we even need to add them to an M paragraph there? I guess we do. That's providing authority for the board. But if the page 12 language gives the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust Account Board the ability to engage through the process with the division, provide testimony, everything else, what do we have to do if we wanted on paragraph M to just provide them with the authority to engage so that it's the traditional process?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, so if you included them if you include them with the language on page 12, which would give them a right to be a commenting agency, request everything of the above, and then you give them the authority to request funds on page 8, then if you wanted them included in the impact assistance, you would have to give the authority for the Department of Revenue to release funds. That would be page 7, lines 1 through 14.
Page 7. But we'd have to amend that language substantially, wouldn't we, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Staben?
My suggestion would be for that language to be a part of the sales and use statutes,
Yeah.
because that's where that direction would come from. And if you wanted to make them a party to the permit, and so that would go their recommendation made by the recommendation being received by the division then presenting it to the council reading the comment and the documents provided by them and making their request, then their request being drawn from the Department of Revenue. However, I have an incredible AG attorney who sits with me, and we always agree 90% of the time, but I wish he was here today, just to support me. But,
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy with that answer, and it
well,
just shows me there's a little bit of complexity that we can't anticipate from the bill, and I appreciate that. And I
Yes.
didn't mean to interrupt you and wanted to let you continue.
no, Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, no, not at all. The one question I would have is if you would need to make this one state agency a party on the permit. And that would be one singular agency while the other 19 remain in a comment status, relying on the division to bring their case forward. So that I would recommend is pause for additional consideration.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Staben,
Senator Rothfuss.
why would we do that? Why would we differentiate them from the rest of the commenting agencies? Make them a party?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, that would be if the intent is for them to be able to directly testify at the hearing, provide evidence at the hearing, provide something more than their comment letter in their request.
I understand, thank you.
Okay, well, you don't have too many changes to this bill. Made it simple, didn't you, Jenny? Huh? Yeah, made it sort of simple. Is there any questions for Jenny on this? Hey, Jenny, I have one there. If we take out page 4 and 5, we leave off with page 3. I think the end of that is page 3A, and then we go to page 6, I believe it is, and it's a little e. Are you okay with us just renumbering that appropriately? If we take out 4 and 5? Oh, good, I stumped her. Yeah.
That's not easy to do.
Yeah, not easy at all.
Mr. Chairman, that would just become B, actually.
It would be,
E would become B,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then it would carry on.
right. A little b.
It'll be,
Chairman Anderson, I believe that would be procedurally more correct to come in line with the contested case rules and the Administrative Procedures Act. I would still encourage any changes as far as the industrial sightings, responsibilities for technical assistance, and helping provide recommendations on wildlife and negotiations, which are page 11.
Okay,
And 12.
okay. Other questions for Jenny with her small changes? Hearing none, thank you, Jenny. We will consider your changes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. And next up,
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bob Budd, Director of the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. I'm neither here to speak for or against the bill, but I did want to take a minute to walk through how we would see ourselves engaging in this process. Certainly more about rabbits than rabbit holes on my end. We have experience with this type of proposal. Most recently, Rocky Mountain Power was required to do mitigation. We were asked to implement that. We did a series of requests for proposals to meet those requirements. We received about 14 applications within the designated area and ultimately met with BLM and others and selected a handful of those projects, which we then contracted and implemented and put on the ground. That's where I see the role that we play is in delivery. That's what we do. If you look at the scope of the projects that we did under that one, it includes some conservation easements in areas of critical importance to sage grouse. There were some that were invasive species management, not only cheatgrass, but also invasive conifers. There was habitat restoration projects that were done in central Wyoming, and that's how we would see ourselves participating in this process. I don't know that it would require us to be a commenter or a participant with the Industrial Siting Commission. We would simply be acting as the state's contractor to deliver the product of mitigation on the ground. The reason that that's been effective, and going back to when we did this with the Jonah Interagency Office, there was a lot of that money ended up being spent on personnel and other things that were not mitigation for the species that were impacted. In our case, there is no fee. We simply run it the same as we do our other projects, and we put the money on the ground. So a company like Rocky Mountain Power came up with a set amount of money that they were to use to deliver those mitigation. Every penny of that went onto the ground into mitigation. That's to the benefit of the state, it's to the benefit of the species that are impacted, and it's to the benefit of the company that's able then to say that they actually truly mitigated their impacts. I don't have anything more, Mr. Chairman, other than that's the process that we would see engaging in. I don't think, as I said, that it requires us to be a party to ISC actions. I think we could submit, and it may mean you need to change the language in the bill a little bit, but this is what we do. I have a tremendous board, and I think we do it very well. We believe in staying in our lane, and that's the lane we would be in. A lot of these we'd work in concert with Game and Fish, so they're already a party to the ISC procedures. I don't think we need to be a party to that. We just need to be allowed to deliver the product. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
questions for Mr. Budd? Questions for Mr. Budd? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
what it sounds like in that last testimony. I thought the light went on, I was wrong. Director Budd, what I gathered from that is that right now with Game and Fish actually being able to be a party, not a party, a commenter, excuse me, this is already largely addressed through the current process for providing unmitigated impact assistance, where that can then come through to you if Game and Fish says, yes, we have an unmitigated impact. They make that in their comment. That comment goes to industrial siting. Industrial siting reads through it and says, okay, we agree, there's clearly an unmitigated impact. That's going to cost $350,000. And so that $350,000 then, through the findings of the industrial siting, gets added to the list. And so the funding will come back through, and that's going to come through the sales and use and get paid through. Am I understanding that correctly, so that it ends up working out as an unmitigated impact that gets paid through our traditional sales and use process already?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I believe you have that correct. We simply are not listed anywhere as a potential contractor, if you will, to deliver the product. And that's where I think the role we would play.
Okay, Dr. Staben thinks I missed something on that, so where did I go wrong, Dr. Staben?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, the current process is typically the comments we receive from Game and Fish are for something like a mitigation plan. And that's what they typically request. As far as any type of exchange of as far as any dollar amount for mitigation, that is a agreement made outside of the industrial siting process between the applicant and then the Game and Fish Department. So at this point in time, the division, we receive requests for mitigation plans, certain types of fencing, gates, that sort of thing, and commitments made on the ground mitigation, but not a dollar amount. So then the Industrial Siting Council permit is based on the information in an application that provided in the comment letters and any additional evidence or testimony. So essentially, when the division, on behalf of the council, is looking for a fulfillment of a permit condition, typically that condition almost always says some kind of mitigation plan, or efforts made to support crucial winter range or something like that. The details of that support or mitigation plan, we look to the application and we look to the comment letter. But as far as a specific dollar amount requested in a comment letter, I have not seen that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Then looking at the unmitigated assistance, impact assistance, where we've got dollar values, I guess that's coming from the communities themselves. That's not coming from the agencies, is that correct?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, the impact assistance right now is limited to local governments and for it to be addressed as described in the use and tax statutes.
Right.
So right now, unmitigated impacts, and I'm gonna make sure I say it completely, they typically include medical services, fire and law enforcement services, roads, public utilities, that can't otherwise be covered by additional employee hours and contracting and that sort of thing. So right now, in our sales and use tax statutes, an unmitigated impact is defined as those items. They do not include wildlife.
Okay, that's useful. Thanks for getting to that point. So there is no path right now to get to a wildlife-based unmitigated impact. Nobody could make that request. Is that accurate?
Right now, there is not a pathway to make that request and for it to come out of impact assistance.
Correct. Thank you.
And,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
and typically, that request is made between the applicant and negotiated with Game and Fish outside of the industrial siting process.
Gotcha, understood. And thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mr. Bud? Any other questions for Mr. Bud? Did we quiz him enough?
We did.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Bud.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Jenny. Any legislators that would like to speak? No, just one?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
think you guys understand right now, obviously the agency, ISC, didn't have a chance to review this bill. it's a very important issue, and whether we do the direct payments or we do industrial siding for the unmitigated compensation, what's available. So having conversations with my co-sponsors, both the chairman of the TRW committees. Chairman, what I'd like to do is to lay this bill back indefinitely, but what I really like to do is continue this discussion with an interim. Those two chairs would like to, at some point in time, have a joint meeting to go over this and really work the issues and bring all the proponents in and see if we can't, I come back to the point that we have world-class energy resources in the state of Wyoming with our wind and our solar and our natural gas and coal. We also have a citizenry that demands world-class mitigation for those unmitigated impacts. And so I think it's a very important component, but I understand the committee's time. I understand also this bill is not ready for prime time, but if we can key this up for an interim, I think it'll be a good topic to take a deep dive into. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would request the committee lay this bill back indefinitely.
Been requested to lay back indefinitely. Any objections? Any objections to that? Hearing no objections, we'll lay this back indefinitely. There was quite a few people that wanted to speak on this. Did that take care of your speaking engagement on this bill? And we had we still have one on Zoom that wants to talk about it? Okay. Oh, we still have a few in the room that want to talk about it too. We're going to cut you short because we're laid it back already, but go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. This is my 5th time that I've been here to offer comment, so I really appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to speak on behalf of the impacted parties, to this whole discussion. I appreciate the bringer of the bill laying this back and the committee's kindness to allow that to be laid back. But the fact remains that there's a request for an interim topic on this. And I just urge caution. This situation, as you heard, is already being handled outside the need for statutory requirements. Adding a 20th agency potentially to the industrial siting process is just an additional layer of procedural expense, inefficiency, duplication of resources that we just, really wanted to put that out there for your consideration as you consider your interim topics through this committee. Piling on, this body spends a lot of time of trying to think of ways that we can try to make Wyoming better and more efficient for our businesses. We're at a time right now where we need additional revenue. We need people coming, paying taxes, generating wealth for our communities. And to continue to turn the industrial siting process into somewhat of a mini state NEPA process, I just urge this committee to use caution as far as continuing on the conversation when we know that it's already happening. So, Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, I'm sorry I just jumped into it knowing that time was short, but my name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm here on behalf of multiple industries that are impacted by the industrial siting process. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that took care of your helper? All right, thank you, Cindy. Anyone else really have a real desire to speak on this bill? Even though, there is.
I think we should probably cut it back.
Yeah,
Brian.
make it short.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Also have shown up for your last 5 committees on this, so very much appreciate the opportunity. I'm Monica Leininger on behalf of the Nature Conservancy. Our organization has done a ton of work related to renewable energy siting. We've facilitated conversations with industry, landowners, local governments, other stakeholders, and would actually appreciate the opportunity to either continue this conversation in this committee or a different committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Monica.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. We are actually one of the other stakeholders that Monica was referencing. We've done a lot of work with sportsmen, and I will tell you that it is one of the #1 things they're asking about right now is what are we doing and how are we handling this? So I do think it is very important that we get in front and have this discussion. We hear it over and over and over again from sportsmen, so we're here in support of this as an interim committee. I think it's a great place to have this discussion and hash out some of these details.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you both. Anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this laid back bill? And there is one on Zoom that still wants to talk to us? Okay, let's have him talk fast.
Bring Brian. He's next.
Maybe he doesn't want to talk to us.
Jeez. Nope, not yet.
And Brian.
Hello, hello. And Brent.
Brian, yeah.
And we can see you, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm going to read my letter. That's the quickest way to address this. And I'm
No.
sending it to
don't
you.
read a letter.
No.
Don't read a letter.
No.
Well, then I'm going to hit the nail on the head.
Okay,
So
hit
my-
the nail on the head.
My letter highlights my Grassroots Coalition, which is a nonprofit. It's a 5-year-old nonprofit in Wyoming. And we have participated now actively at 2 Wyoming Industrial Siting Council hearings. And in the letter, I've given you links to articles that talked about closed door meetings and inefficiencies with DEQ. So I definitely think that you do need to be focused on this. We have hundreds of members in Southeast Wyoming, and we're identifying inefficiencies with DEQ and with industrial siting, and those need to be noted because right now, to take, for example, rail tie wind and all the special conditions, that one project had more special conditions placed by industrial siting than any other energy project in the state ever. And it's our observation they were ill-equipped to enforce any of those special conditions. They were threatened with legal issues regarding that. And that whole process is summarized in a Cowboy State article
Yes,
on July 10th.
question.
Mr.
question
Chairman,
here.
thank you.
Yes, yes.
Ms. Brand, on wildlife impact, any comments about wildlife impact? And then we need to move on.
So make it quick, Ann.
So comments on wildlife impact, to be quick, I think could start at the county level with a 200-page document we submitted to the Albany County Commissioners. I can't summarize a 200-page submission from Paul Kapp representing our conservancy. That would have to be submitted in the future.
Okay.
And we also submitted comments from our legal representation at Wyoming Industrial Siting, both regarding rail tie wind and Two Rivers wind. So those would all be
I'm
there.
gonna have to cut you off. Can you send us that letter like you said?
Yep,
and
you bet I can.
that-
It just gives the background, it gives some links. It
Okay.
does give links to federal petitions. It does note lawsuits against the BLM where we got a voluntary remand. It gets to how we would like to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And is that all of them on the,
Public comments closed.
so that closes public comment? So we already know what we're doing to that bill. The maker has decided to lay it back and work on it later. Next bill to come before us. Next bill to come before us.
Do you have anything to talk about?
Mr. Chairman, committee, it's good to be here.
Senator Boner, please.
Yeah, so I have another industrial signing bill. Hopefully this one's a little more,
Oh, good.
hopefully this one's a little less complex, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just get right to the point. This was a result of a conversation I had with the county commissioner in the western side of my district. The concern is that we've seen a lot of work going through the Industrial Siting Council on these wind and solar projects. And they're doing extraordinary work with a very small staff. And so what this bill does is it extends the deadlines to allow for a more thorough discussion and really give our county commissioners and the Industrial Siting Council an opportunity to really process this information in a thorough and efficient manner. And so that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman. It's extending the deadlines. You'll see we start off in Title 18, so dealing with the county commissions. They have 2 timeframes, one to hold a public meeting and the second one to basically respond to it. So we're extending that from 45 to 60 days to up to 90 days to hold the hearing. applicant, the developer may extend, if they so choose, and then from 45 to 60 days to produce a finding. Then we get into Title 35, which is more the Industrial Siding Council side of the equation. If we extend that timeframe, that the request from some of the developers was to extend the opportunity to cure a deficiency in application. Right now, they have a 30-day window. With the extension, they ask for a 60-day window, is at the request of industry. And then extending the timeline for the Industrial Siding Council from 90 to 120 days. Effective date of January 1st, 2026. So that's slightly different, Mr. Chairman, as it, once again, at the request of industry, making sure that any permits currently in the pipeline are not negatively affected by this change. So that's a bill. I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Yes. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner, I had a question. If all of these deadlines got extended and they took the full amount on every single one, how much would that add to someone's timeline?
Oh goodness, and we do math. Let's see, 30 plus 15. It's looks like it's going to be 4 to 5 months if I had to guess. Want to emphasize that this was coordinated. I can't say I talked to every last developer or wind and solar company, but I did discuss it with a few, and they've had their input. And so, yeah.
Other questions? Other questions? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the statutory context, and so I can't easily glean this, but it seems like a lot of this applies to all projects, and I'm struggling to find a part of it that applies only to solar and wind projects specifically, although I'm suspecting that must be the case in some of these provisions. So which provisions are general provisions related to industrial siding, and which provisions are specific only to wind and solar?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding it applies to all, to wind and solar only. I could look that up really quick within the statutes, but I believe these are only dealing with wind and solar.
All of these provisions are wind and
Correct.
solar only?
I'll double check, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well, other questions? Other questions for the bringer? Other questions? Are you going to look that up and get back to us on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that'd be wonderful. Thank you, Senator. Any agencies like to speak on this one? Any agencies like to speak on this one?
Please, sir.
Chairman Anderson, Senate members. I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siding at DEQ, and I will be brief.
Really?
As far as
All right, Jenny.
I do not have any procedural suggestions for this bill or comments. I would like to say that overall, the proposed changes would give opportunity for there to be more time to cure application deficiencies, more time to negotiate conditions between industrial siding and the applicant, time for local governments to develop their impact assistance requests, time for them to come together on an MOU. These local governments do have to have special meetings, figure out what those impact assistance requests would be. Typically, the council does look for an MOU. That MOU does not necessarily say all of the local governments agree with what each other's asking for, but it typically will say, even if we don't agree with you, we will leave it to the council to decide. It streamlines the process. This would also provide additional time for all of the parties to fully develop their pre-filed statements as well as their evidence. And it would provide additional time to cure any issues that arise during a permit proceeding. As the division essentially sets up and takes a portable courtroom around the state, it would help with any small issues, including making sure the venue doesn't cancel on us. So just an additional time would be helpful to the overall process.
Okay, any questions for Jenny? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Dr. Staben, I just asked the same question I asked the sponsor. Are all of these provisions exclusively for solar and wind projects, or are some of these general provisions?
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, the provisions that apply to the Industrial Siting Act, those would be the ones in Title 35. And I was too eager to close this book and leave you all. I don't mean it that way. But as they would apply in.
Yeah, no one will be offended if you did mean it that way, let's be honest, yeah. You lost no one.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
As far as how they would apply on page 3, that would apply to all of our permit proceedings. It would essentially add, it would give us 30 additional days to put on a hearing and would add, I believe, 15 days to get a permit written.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the Title 18 work is specific to wind and solar. Title 35 that we see here is all industrial siting processes. Is that accurate?
That's where the bill is titled industrial, comma,
Yeah, it says
wind
industrial.
and solar.
Right. Chairman Anderson, Senator
Yes.
Rothfuss, it would be the timing on page 2, that would apply to county commission decisions, not the Industrial Siting Council. And that would be on wind and solar. You are correct.
That one's on wind and solar, okay, so.
Correct. At
Those
the
are wind and
county
solar
commission.
only, but the 35, 12, 110 provisions are all industrial siting. Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Is that your story? And you're sticking to it, Jenny?
Chairman Anderson, yes, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for Jenny? Any other questions for Jenny? And I see the maker is up. He has an answer for us about this also. Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's correct, and I'd argue that that's entirely relevant to the purpose of the bill. The ultimate purpose is to provide a little bit more leeway for our state agency that does a lot of good work, and if there's anything other than wind and solar, I think that they need to be extended for those projects as well.
okay, all right. We got the answer on that then. All right, thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak on this? Any other?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Robert Short, Commerce County Commissioner and Vice President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. As an association, we stand in support of this bill. We believe it gives this agency time to better analyze and go through the due diligence necessary to ensure that we're doing everything proper to give the project proponents opportunities to make changes as necessary to conform with our regulatory environment. And we stand in support of this bill, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Short, who's misnamed, by the way.
It's about my hair, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tall. Okay, thank you, Mr. Short. Anyone else like to speak on Senate File 154? Anyone else? There is one in Zoom. Let's hear one in Zoom. Kelly, can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes. Make it brief, Kelly.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Kelly Carpenter, Wyoming Farm Bureau, thanks for the opportunity to join virtually. We sit in support of this bill due to many of the same reasons that the previous speakers have mentioned. So with that, incredibly brief, sitting in support of the bill, and I'll take any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Kelly? Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Well done. That closes the room and Zoom. So we'll close public comment. And committee, what's your pleasure? Move the bill and seconded by Cooper. Any discussion, any changes? Do you have any changes or anything you want to do to it? We could call Jenny up here and get some changes if you guys wanted. Hearing none, let's do a roll call.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 154. Senator Cooper?
Aye.
Senator Jones? Aye. Senator Nethercott?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss?
Aye.
Chairman Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes.
That that Senate File 154 snuck by. Senator Boner, are you going to take it on the floor? You squeezed by the. I'm going to sneak out of here. Okay, all right, yeah. One more bill, we're going to get it done. I think we have, the maker is on the Zoom, I believe. He's on medical leave today, so he's going to Zoom in for us. Senator Boner, or Barlow, excuse me, are you there?
There he is.
Oh, he is there.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, I appreciate your consideration of this bill. Eric Barlow, Senate District 23. I apologize, I'm not there in person, but I am shedding a virus that I don't want to share with any of my colleagues or the public. So thank you for this indulgence. Members of the body, I'll just give just a brief overview. I know there are experts in the room, likely, that can give you more information on sage grouse and the path we've been on sage grouse for some 20 plus years. But sage grouse, as you know, Mr. Chairman, in your industry and the industries that I'm in, et cetera, has long been a concern. And the concern has been about preventing its listing as an endangered species by the federal government. So in light of that, in the mid-2000s, there was an executive order created under Governor Friedenthal, and it's carried through the current governorship, and it's been modified over time. But that is kind of the genesis of where we are as far as avoiding a endangered species listing and then using executive action. In 2015, the legislature adopted some statute, Chapter 9, Articles 1 and 2, that established a sage grouse implementation team. And duties there, and if Mr. Budd is in the room, he will be able to speak, of course, to what they do and how they're formed, et cetera. And then the second part of the legislation second piece of legislation that year set up a mitigation credit system. Mr. Chairman, that mitigation credit system relies on a provider, if you will. And that provider is a very good company that does a good job and providing these credits should they be necessary. Understanding that our first goals in this realm are avoidance and then minimization, and then if we can't do those things, we mitigate and or we have these credits. So, Mr. Chairman, what this bill does, and I'll just go right to the bill. I know you're short of time, and I want to be cognizant of your time and other people in the room, which I don't know who are there. What this bill does go into current statute and just reinforces something that is mentioned in the statute, but there's really been no effort to actually implement it. If you'll go to page 2 of the bill, Mr. Chairman, current language talks about including, line 14, page 2, including operator offered measures. So this is the operator. Generally, we're going to be candid. This is oil and gas generally who are subject to this, and it has to do with setbacks from LECs, maybe some timing issues, but mostly setback from LECs, which are the breeding grounds for sage grouse. And what you'll see is owner-operated, but we've not actually fleshed that out. There are rules that speak to that, but the rules don't actually define how much different or what we can do that. So what I've done, Mr. Chairman, with this is go in with some proposed new language that talks about in lieu of or in addition to the credit system, which like I said, relies on a provider. That provider operates out of the center of the state. The operator can actually provide these things in the same area where the activity occurs. So an example, not long ago in this last calendar year, there was an activity in Crook County. They needed to buy some credits. Those credits were purchased, but they were applied in another county. Well, that doesn't change or help the sage grouse where this mitigation was needed. It is basically a transfer of responsibility to someone else. So, Mr. Chairman, this comes up because in our community, this over the last 20 years, our area has been considered as core area. And core area in the sage-grouse world is a big deal. It limits your ability to use your lands, particularly for oil and gas development, develop your minerals, whether they be federal or fee minerals or state minerals. It could limit those abilities. So, Mr. Chairman, as we came into this last round of considering what the federal government may do with sage-grouse, a group of landowners in my community, including my ranch, so I certainly have a different understanding of this than many may have, it was being proposed that we were part of core area. And what we looked for was other avenues where we could actually mitigate, if you will, the impact to our private property rights. One of the differences between our core area and all the other core areas in the state is ours is 80+% private lands. Many of the other core areas in the state of Wyoming, Mr. Chairman, are the opposite. They're mostly public lands. And so that's a significant change in at least in perception and impact to private landowners and mineral owners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, what this bill does is simply say, hey, if an operator wants to do something, they can make proposals and do it in the same area as long as we're actually trying to mitigate, first avoid, then minimize, and then if we need to mitigate, compensatory mitigation on a neighboring property if that's available. Mr. Chairman, going on to page 3 of the bill, one of the things about the compensatory bank system is that responsibility gets placed with that bank system, with that operator or that provider. The operator would remain responsibility. If you line 1, 2, and then there's a way you can actually, I built this in, so if later on the operator says this is no longer feasible because of other encroaching development, then they could go to the mitigation credit provider. Mr. Chairman, interestingly, I know that people would look at this and say, well, on line 8 and 9, eminent domain, I can't imagine this, but the Mineral Leasing Act, Mr. Chairman, of 1920 allows for reasonable use of the surface. And if we put regulatory interests or regulatory inclinations in statute, which we don't have, it's actually an executive order, then there could be the argument that somebody could use eminent domain on private lands to get these compensatory mitigation activities. So I just feel maybe it's a small ask, but I think it's meaningful. Mr. Chairman, trying to be brief, I'll be glad to stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Any questions, committee? Any questions, committee, for Senator Barlow? Senator Barlow. Thank you, Senator Barlow, and good luck on that, being on sick leave.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Any agency like to speak on this?
Mr. Chairman, Bob Budd, I'm the chairman of the Sage Grouse Implementation Team, here to express support for the bill. We think it clarifies some of the things we've been trying to do. As Senator Rothfuss will remember, a few years ago when we built this statute, these were questions, and I think it strengthens what we have in statute and helps us implement the rules that we have. So in the interest of brevity, I'm happy to answer any questions, but fully support the statute change as recommended.
Questions for Mr. Budd? Questions for Mr. Budd? Thank you, Mr. Budd.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senators. Angie Bruce, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish. We do know that the bird benefits when we do mitigation the closest to where we're impacting it. So this bill really does that and acknowledges that. It also makes it clear that the operator is free to do this. Under the current statute, you might say that that is currently available, but this adds some clarity in that this is an option. We always encourage the operator to consider this whenever we work with them, provide technical assistance, and we'll continue to do so. So with that, any questions?
Oh, thank you, Angie. Any questions for Angie in the Game and Fish? Yes, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Director Bruce, I was just wondering, how are we doing with our sage grouse numbers?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, they are bouncing back up. Like most things after that bad winter, they were not as harmed by that bad winter, but they are in the upswing, almost at the top of their cyclical cycle. So we could see them continue to raise this year and maybe another year before they start doing their dip again. But again, that's normal.
Good, good. Nothing? Thank you, Angie. Any public like to speak on this bill, Senate File 179? Any public like to speak on this bill? We don't have any, oh, we have one? Okay, we'll have one from Zoom then, too.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Carpenter, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Thanks again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the opportunity to address you virtually today. Again, I will be very brief. We stand in support of the bill and appreciate the clarity that it provides to the existing statutes. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Kelly, I could see Senator Barlow's head get bigger when you were speaking like that. He liked that conversation.
Very good. Thank you.
Any questions for Kelly, committee? Any questions for Kelly? Hearing none. Thank you, Kelly, for your testimony. That's it on the Zoom. That's it on the room. We'll close public testimony. And committee, what's your pleasure?
Move it.
Moved by,
I'm Tara.
oh, are you Tara? Moved by Tara. Seconded by
Stacy.
you? No, by Rothfuss. There's 2 seconds. There was 2 seconds. Any discussion, any changes? Would you like to change a couple pages? Would you like to delete a couple pages or anything? No? No? All right. All right. Let's have a roll call then.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 179. Senator Cooper,
Excused.
Senator Jones. Aye. Senator Nethercutt,
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that's 4 ayes, 1 excused.
Senator Barlow, I think you squeaked by. Do you want to carry this on the floor?
Yes, sir, I'd be pleased to. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee.
All right, thank you.
It's still laborious, right? And laborious.
And with that, the business of the Senate